78 years young, and Sally Field has nothing to prove. Her legacy is cemented, her future secure. 2 Oscars, 3 Primetime Emmys, 2 Golden Globes, years of unforgettable performances, and the lasting glory of being one of Hollywood's greatest and most universally loved and versatile actresses. From Norma Rae to Steel Magnolias, from Places in the Heart to her devastatingly sad performance in Forrest Gump, she has consistently played characters with candor, warmth, and a sort of emotional bravery that left people thinking they were observing someone live rather than perform. But behind the applause, behind the rave notices and ovations, there is a different tale. A tale Sally Field doesn't often share. Despite all the sweetness and humility, despite all the tears she has cried on screen, she has also borne her own scars. Scars of betrayals, of condescension, of men who patronized her, and of co-stars who regarded her as a collaborator, but as competition, or worse, as someone to be mastered. Sally Field has always been mindful of her language. For much of her career, she never wanted to be seen as bitter or resentful. She was the pro, the peacemaker, the actress who could get along with anybody. But time passes. Time changes people. Age changes people. And as she's grown older, Field has been more candid. In memoirs, in interviews, and in off-the-record talk that filtered into the public domain, she has given the names of 6 actresses with whom she fought, actresses who hurt her badly, and actresses she without compunction admitted she hated to work with. They were not squabbles. They were not about who had the nicer trailer or who had more lines. These were bruising battles of ego and power, some of them personal, some professional, all of them deep. Collectively, they constitute a roll call that astonishes even those who believe they were familiar with Hollywood, for showing us that even the brightest lights are sometimes required to blaze with images of darkness in the background when Sally Field lifts the veil. Let's start. The Heartbreaker, Burt Reynolds. Of all the names on Sally's list, maybe the least surprising is Burt Reynolds. Their affair was tabloid dynamite. During the late 1970s, they were Hollywood's golden couple, the gruff, mustachioed leading man and America's girl next door, together both on screen and off. Smokey and the Bandit made them a cultural sensation, and their jokey, banter-like chemistry seemed so authentic that viewers believed they were witnessing a true love story in progress. But behind the scenes, things were much less picturesque. In her memoir, In Pieces, Sally lifted the curtain on their relationship. She wrote of Burt as being controlling, dismissive, and emotionally manipulative. Initially, he was the perfect Southern gentleman, funny, charming, energetic. But the deeper the relationship became, the more his darker side came out. He fed on domination. He belittled her in roundabout, but biting ways. He made fun of her appearance, challenged her intellect, and habitually wrote off her capabilities as an actress. He interrupted her in the middle of a sentence, overruled her, and in public interviews gave her backhanded compliments that left her seething in silence. One day he'd lavish her with approval, and the next day he'd deny it to her as a punishment. "I never felt fully seen," Sally subsequently confessed. "I was present, but not me. Not the entire me." Even during her heyday, Sally frequently felt invisible alongside Burt. To everyone, he was the bandit, sexily, threateningly, irresistibly handsome. To her, he turned into a man who gradually eroded her identity. And yet, she loved him. Or at least she tried to. That's what made it so sad. She wanted to make it work. She gave everything she had. But the more she gave, the more he took. By the end, she admitted she wasn't even sure who the real Burt Reynolds was. The charming star the public loved? Or the controlling partner who came home at night? Burt Reynolds could have been America's heartthrob, but to Sally Field, he was heartbreak disguised. And he was merely the start. The ego, Tommy Lee Jones. While Burt Reynolds hurt Sally on a personal level, Tommy Lee Jones hurt her on a professional one. The two collaborated on Backroads, 1981, a tough little drama that allowed Sally to play a seriously flawed character. She came onto the set, ready to work with someone, to get into the material, to make something real. Instead, she was working with one of the chilliest co-stars of her life. From the first rehearsal, Jones barely greeted her. He provided no small talk, no bonding, no effort to create the sort of trust that most actors depend upon during emotionally intense shoots. He arrived at set, hit his mark, spoke his lines, and departed. There was no warmth, no respect, only ice. For Sally, who loved the emotional intimacy and kindness between actors, it was a nightmare. She subsequently commented she felt she was acting opposite a wall. She attempted to penetrate, asking questions about his characters, banter between takes, even lightly nudging him to open up. But Jones was unmoved. Oftentimes, she said, he didn't even glance at her. Backroads was dismissed by critics when it was released, criticizing a lack of chemistry between its stars. What the public didn't realize was that the chemistry wasn't only missing, it had been actively discouraged. Sally made it plain, we were to have played two broken people falling in love, but I was playing alone. She completed the movie for the simple reason that she was a professional, but the experience devastated her. It left her alone, small, and very disappointed. She never worked with Tommy Lee Jones again and never wished to. The chaos, Robert Blake. Whereas Tommy Lee Jones had been cold, Robert Blake was fire, reckless, uncontrolled, and risky to be around. Sally's conflicts with Blake occurred on the Dune Project Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole, a 1970s TV pilot. Blake, already notorious for his unpredictability, brought his own brand of chaos to the set that made the production of the show all but impossible. He would switch lines unexpectedly. He would deviate from script in the middle of a scene, leaving Sally disoriented. He would take over moments, ruin meticulously rehearsed takes, and then explode at crew members for the smallest of things. One day he was sullen and introspective. Another day he was a tempest, yelling at lighting technicians storming off stage or sulking in his trailer. For Sally, who already had the burden of a high-strung role, it was wearying. She wasn't playing a part, she was dealing with him, placating him, attempting to keep the shoot going. But it was a battle she couldn't win. Eventually, the entire endeavor fell apart. The show was canceled before it ever saw the light of day, a victim of dysfunction that spilled into every aspect of the shoot. Some actors act, Sally would say later. Some actors attempt to make everyone around them small, so they can feel large. Blake was the latter. It was a disappointing experience for her. It was traumatic. She left with a promise. She would never again confuse confusion with brilliance. The rival, Shirley MacLaine. Some of Sally's confrontations weren't with explosive men, but with equally strong women. And among them, Shirley MacLaine stands tallest. At first glance, their on-screen pairing in Steel Magnolias seemed like a fairy tale. Two movie legends, starring together in a tale of love, strength, and friendship. But off-screen, their relationship was far from a cakewalk. Sally came to the job with untrained sensitivity. She craved nuance, truth, openness. MacLaine, on the other hand, played every scene like a war zone. She boasted about her Oscar history, interrupted shots, and transformed moments of somber tragedy into sardonic one-liners aimed at upstaging. One very poignant scene took 17 shots, not because Sally couldn't perform it correctly, but because Shirley wouldn't play it straight. She kept inserting wisecracks, undermining Sally's emotional performance with funny one-liners. It was a confrontation not of talent, but of ego. Sally wanted to be a servant to the story. Shirley wanted to be the center of the room. Years later, Sally would only hint at the experience, remarking that Shirley brought a cloud of chaos wherever she went. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. The tension persisted long after the last cut. Audiences cried at Sally's devastating monologue, but she knew the true pain had played out off-camera. The manipulator, James Woods. There was James Woods. Their work on Kiss Me Goodbye, 1982, might have been enjoyable, a light romantic comedy with an offbeat twist. Instead, it was one of the most poisonous experiences of Sally's working life. Woods contributed intensity, yes, but he also contributed ego. He analyzed scripts, redrafted dialogue over the back of a chair, undermined the director, and frequently criticized Sally in front of others. What might have been witty repartee turned into psychological warfare. Sally described him as intellectually intimidating, the kind of man who used his sharp wit not to collaborate but to dominate. Off camera, he undermined her confidence with casual remarks. "You're not really giving enough," he told her once, after a particularly emotional day. To him, it was just a comment. To her, it felt like sabotage. "It wasn't the job that wore me down," she would say later. "It was having to constantly defend my worth." The experience toughened her. It made her more cautious, more reluctant to put up with conceit masquerading as genius. Which didn't only hurt her ego. He made her cautious about ever allowing herself to be shut up again. The disappointment, Dustin Hoffman. The last name on Sally's list may be the biggest surprise. Dustin Hoffman. They never even shared the screen as co-stars in a completed film, but their close call of collaboration in the early 1980s unsettled Sally. She was hired in for a chemistry read with Hoffman on a project that never materialized. It was to be a bright prospect for her. For him, it was a playground to assert control. From the moment she walked into the room, Hoffman dominated. He joked with the producers, dismissed the script, and when Sally read, he interrupted her again and again, admonishing her delivery, mocking her decisions, questioning her interpretation. She wasn't being criticized. She was being humiliated. Subsequently, she learned from a mutual friend that Hoffman had boasted of sabotaging the audition, explaining that the chemistry wasn't there because he had arranged it so. For Sally, it was crushing. For weeks, she tortured herself. But in time, she saw the reality. It wasn't about her. It was about his need to control, to dominate, to establish himself as the smartest man in the room. She referred to it as one of the most embarrassing moments in her working life. And she never forgot it. Conclusion, the list and the legacy. Sally Field is not a bitter woman. She is not defined by grievances, but she is truthful. And as she has aged, she has become willing to acknowledge what so many women in Hollywood suffer through. That behind the glitz, there is a war of egos where niceness is too frequently confused with weakness and where genius may occasionally conceal ugliness. Her roster of 6, Burt Reynolds, Tommy Lee Jones, Robert Blake, Shirley MacLaine, James Woods, and Dustin Hoffman, erases nothing. Quite the opposite. It solidifies it, because for every troubled man or woman she dealt with, Sally Field persisted. She continued to act. She continued to shine. And she showed, time and again, that her craft was more powerful than the darkness cast by others. At 78, with nothing to prove, she speaks the truth not for revenge, but for honesty. For once, she doesn't have to be the good girl. She doesn't have to smile when she hurts. She can just say it. These were the ones who hurt her, who belittled her, who made her small. And in so doing, she finally reclaims the power they once sought to steal from her. Because Sally Field has never been merely an actress. She